Watch your tone, Crockett. You know that micromanaging every cent slows down our troops. Patriotism costs money.
What followed was less a debate and more a laser-guided missile of righteous fury. Crockett, never one to tiptoe around polite euphemisms, carved right into the heart of the rot, hyper-detailed meddling by senior officials so addicted to controlling every postage stamp purchase that no one had bandwidth left to catch the avalanche of off-the-books transfers zipping between subdepartments. As she put it, they weren't watching the vault because they were counting paper clips. Her voice dripped with incredulity, almost mocking the absurdity. She recounted whistleblower briefings where colonels spent hours redlining coffee filter orders while multi-million-dollar contract amendments bypassed review, buried under the noise of endless micro-edits. An entire culture obsessed with triple-checking hotel per diems let private contractors quietly reroute funds through nested shell companies, the sort of accounting origami that hides billions better than any offshore bank. Hegseth tried to cut in, claiming that granular oversight is exactly how you prevent abuse, but Crockett barreled past him. She cited a damning Inspector General memo describing analysis paralysis so severe that senior brass demanded real-time updates on snack bar inventory while strategic procurement software lay unpatched, ripe for manipulation. Micromanagement became the camouflage, she thundered. 1,000 tiny flashlights pointed at the floor so nobody noticed the roof collapsing. The line hit like a heavyweight punch. Studio producers exchanged frantic glances as social media feeds exploded. #Paperclipgate trended within minutes. A digital bonfire fueled by citizens sick of being told the cupboard is bare while billions slip away in bureaucratic busywork. Crockett's rage was not the performative fury of a politician chasing sound bites. It was bone-deep empathy for communities in her district that scrape for pennies. She described school boards wrestling over whether to cut art programs or bus routes because federal grants arrived late. She spoke of hospitals deferring equipment upgrades, of city councils shelving infrastructure repairs, all while Pentagon managers obsessed over font consistency and quarterly expense summaries. Kids can't drink a PowerPoint, she snapped, voice cracking just enough to reveal the personal wounds behind her political armor. You could see some panelists physically recoil, as if realizing they were seated opposite a live wire. Hegseth tried again, this time pivoting to national security. He claimed Crockett's accusations armed America's adversaries with propaganda. She shot back that the real gift to hostile powers is the spectacle of a superpower so tangled in its own red tape it can't secure its own wallet. Our enemies don't need disinformation campaigns, she hissed. They just need popcorn while we implode and audit hell. The clapback ricocheted across the airwaves. Veterans tweeted agreement, lamenting how mission-critical repairs get snarled in approval chains 3 layers thick, while shady subcontractors waltz through loopholes big enough to land a cargo plane. Her next salvo zeroed in on the psychology of micromanagement, the anxious impulse of decision-makers allergic to delegation, terrified of accountability, yet ironically blind to the catastrophic consequences of their own nitpicking. She told a story of a contracting officer so micromanaged he spent 9 hours adjusting the shade of blue on a presentation chart while a $120 million maintenance contract sailed through with no competitive bids. That contract, she noted, later ballooned by 40% through opaque change orders, the bureaucratic equivalent of highway robbery. She rolled out more examples. Each one a grenade, a $15 million training program signed off because senior staff were busy interrogating junior analysts over $12 taxi fares. An entire cybersecurity upgrade tabled for 6 months while managers micromanaged catering budgets. With each anecdote, Hegseth's posture stiffened, his practiced composure fraying at the edges. The conversation spiraled toward chaos when Crockett unleashed a statistic the Pentagon hoped would stay buried. Over half of the disputed $2 billion cycled through micro-purchase thresholds, individual transactions under $10,000, rubber-stamped by middle managers too terrified of missing deadlines to exercise real scrutiny. They call it micro, but add up $10,000 enough times and soon you're bleeding real money, she said, voice silky but lethal. She compared it to a leaky faucet. One drip seems trivial until you receive a water bill big enough to drown a town. The metaphor landed so cleanly that Hegseth's rebuttal sputtered before it reached his lips. As sparks flew under studio lights, the nation's living rooms became front-row seats to an unfiltered indictment of a bureaucracy gone berserk. Crockett hammered home that micromanagement wasn't just an internal culture flaw. It was weaponized by contractors who learned that the louder they applauded petty oversight, the more distracted auditors became. She described audit tourism. Executives scheduling reviews of minor supply closets the same week major asset transfers occurred. Auditors, buried in pettiness, missed the financial freight trains barreling by. It was the con artist's dream, hide the elephant behind a swarm of gnats. At this point Crockett's rhetoric grew volcanic. She compared the Pentagon's hierarchy to a monstrous ant farm, each tunnel representing a committee fixated on its own granular domain, blissfully unaware that termites, private firms, political donors, shadow lobbyists, were devouring the foundation. The audience gasped as she leaned forward, eyes blazing, and snarled. Micromanagement didn't just open the door to corruption, it rolled out a red carpet, offered champagne, and begged corruption to make itself comfortable. Cameras captured perspiration beading on Hegseth's forehead. For a brief moment he seemed less a pundit and more a man realizing he'd walked into a hurricane wearing paper shoes. Social media commentators dissected every syllable in real time. Memes popped up featuring Pentagon officials counting thumbtacks while dollar bills fluttered away in the background. Late-night hosts lined up monologues skewering a military machine that could track staple usage in Guam yet lose billions stateside. And through it all Crockett doubled down, unfazed by threats of backlash. She granted interviews to outlets spanning the ideological spectrum, challenging anyone to defend a system so consumed by micromanagement that it tripped over its own spreadsheets. In one gripping podcast appearance she painted an almost cinematic scene, overworked staffers hunched over purchase order minutiae at 2 a.m., while massive data migration contracts whisked funds into untraceable black holes. We're talking about accountants choking on decimals while fiscal vultures fly off with suitcases of cash, she said. The host was speechless. Collins flooded their lines, veterans, civil servants, procurement officers, all testifying to the same lethal combination of nitpicking and negligence. Hegseth, scrambling to reclaim footing, attempted a reputational counterattack, accusing Crockett of grandstanding for political gain, but his efforts rang hollow against a galloping tide of first-hand testimonials. When a coalition of retired auditors publicly endorsed her claims, citing years of priority whiplash, commanders obsessing over petty compliance metrics while trillion-dollar programs ran on handshake promises, Hegseth's narrative collapsed. Viewers who entered the week indifferent to Pentagon finances ended it incensed, armed with haunting mental images of generals micromanaging coffee budgets like caffeine czars while warfighters reused obsolete equipment. Crockett didn't stop at calling out the problem. She outlined solutions with a ferocity rarely seen in legislative circles. She proposed capping micropurchase authorities, mandating AI-assisted anomaly detection to flag patterns of decentralized spending sprees, and, in her boldest move, tying promotion eligibility for senior officials to genuine audit outcomes instead of busywork compliance scores. If you want to climb the ladder, she growled on a primetime segment, show me you can guard the vault instead of rearranging paperweights. Lobbyists went white-knuckled at the prospect. The defense industry's reaction was swift, behind-the-scenes phone calls, frantic white papers, ominous warnings about readiness, all meant to scare Congress out of action. But Crockett met them head-on, daring them to testify in public. Let's see you explain, she taunted. Why my constituents pay more in overdraft fees than your companies pay for losing billions. Within days, bipartisan pressure built for emergency hearings. Even lawmakers historically allergic to military criticism sensed the electoral danger of being labeled complicit with micro-mischief. Committees subpoenaed internal correspondence revealing high-ranking officers personally approving line-item edits down to name-badge procurement while delegating bulk financial reconciliations to undertrained temps. It read like farce, if farce could siphon $2 billion and still demand a bigger budget next year. Congressional staffers admitted privately that Crockett's televised explosion had done more to ignite reform momentum than a decade of dry reports. Meanwhile, on military bases, the rank and file erupted in cautious applause. Enlisted personnel know micromanagement's pain intimately, endless mandatory training modules on stapler safety while barracks roofs leak. They watched Crockett call out the absurd system that strings them up for lost wrenches yet shrugs at missing millions. Morale soared as she insisted real leadership protects both money and soldiers, not spreadsheets. One sergeant penned a viral op-ed praising her for saying aloud what troops whisper in mess halls, that micromanagement is the enemy no foreign power could dream of inventing. Predictably, establishment commentators tried to paint Crockett as anti-military, but the accusation boomeranged. Veterans rallied behind her message that true readiness isn't hoarded behind walls of secrecy. They called for mission-focused oversight, citing the tragic irony of Navy ships stuck in dry dock while supervisors triple audit sailors' toothbrush allowances. Veterans groups once wary of politicians found themselves cheering a civilian lawmaker who understood that bureaucracy kills budgets and sometimes even people. As days turned to weeks, Crockett's infamy crystallized into legend. Satirical cartoons depicted her wielding an oversized highlighter, illuminating hidden ledgers while generals cowered behind PowerPoints. Street murals popped up in Austin and Oakland, Crockett ripping red tape like confetti while jets thundered overhead. Everywhere she went, reporters asked if she feared backlash. Her response was a cold smile. Backlash from pencil-pushing kleptocrats? Please, I faced worse in traffic. The quip went viral, instantly etched onto protest signs at marches demanding a full forensic audit. Even Wall Street took notice. Defense contractors' stock dipped as analysts fretted about stricter procurement rules. Investor calls buzzed with talk of a Crockett risk. shorthand for accountability finally catching up. Shareholders peppered CEOs with uncomfortable questions about contract transparency. In quarterly filings, obscure line items once lost in footnotes became front-page explanations, proof that fear of sunlight makes cockroaches scramble. The Pentagon attempted damage control, issuing statements promising streamlined oversight initiatives. Yet the very phrase exposed the underlying contradiction, streamlining the oversight that was already suffocating itself with excess detail. Crockett pounced. She blasted the announcement as akin to putting a GPS on every pigeon and calling it air defense. The soundbite dominated evening news, overshadowing official rebuttals mired in bureaucratese. Her singular gift was linguistic napalm, phrases that stuck to the brain and burned away obfuscation. One late-night showdown sealed Hegseth's defeat. Invited back for a rematch, he unveiled newly minted talking points lauding granular stewardship. Crockett laughed, actually laughed, before surgically dismantling his defense. She rattled off fresh evidence, internal emails instructing staff to spend entire workdays reconciling $50 discrepancies while billions in cyber contract overruns remained unaudited. Her crescendo, this isn't stewardship. It's fiddling on Rome's receipt book while Rome buys another violin with missing money. Studio audience gasped, but she wasn't done. Micromanagement is the drip torture that numbs watchdogs until they forget what bark is for, she concluded, voice dangerously soft. It was a knockout blow. Hegseth blinked, swallowed, and managed only a weak protest about context. In the aftermath, Crockett's crusade reshaped public expectations. Civic forums buzzed with newly awakened watchdogs demanding granular transparency without the granulated madness. Schoolchildren wrote essays comparing lost marbles to lost millions, their innocence highlighting adult absurdity. Political cartoons became teaching aids, a general counting grains of rice while a thief siphoned bags in the background. Congressional staff, once buried in busy work, found themselves scrambling to design oversight that measured outcomes, not paper clips. All the while, Crockett kept her foot on the gas. She introduced legislation tying micro-purchase limits to automated reporting triggers, setting off alarms when departments slice budgets into slivers to dodge scrutiny. The bill threatened prison time for executives who knowingly exploit micromanagement distractions to mask fraud. Lobbyists wailed. Grassroots donors poured in small-dollar contributions, turning Crockett into a fundraising powerhouse. She pledged every penny to voter education campaigns explaining why the fight against micromanagement matters. At the dinner table, because when Washington spends a month debating whether sergeants can have ergonomic chairs, your kid's classroom ceiling caves in. By summer's end, Crockett's revolution had mutated into a cultural movement. Memes urging managers everywhere to stop counting paperclips adorned office cubicles. Corporate leadership seminars cited her tirade as a textbook warning, micromanage and you might just lose the farm. Silicon Valley startups printed her quotes on t-shirts, celebrating agile empowerment instead of bureaucratic chokeholds. Even TV crime dramas borrowed her storyline, featuring rogue auditors exposing embezzlement hidden beneath layers of penny-pinching directives. Pop culture devoured the narrative, and Crockett's star rose. Yet she never let the gravity of spectacle eclipse the moral core. In a town hall streamed to millions, she returned to why she'd erupted in the first place, people suffering. She recounted meeting a single mom juggling two jobs who cried telling her that student lunch debt ruined their family credit. While politicians told her budgets are tight, Crockett's eyes softened, but her words stayed razor-sharp. Budgets aren't tight, she said quietly. They're tangled in red tape, bleeding out while micromanagers watch the wrong numbers. The crowd fell hushed, many wiping tears. Then thunderous applause erupted, echoing far beyond the auditorium. Love her or loathe her, no one could deny Crockett altered the conversation. Micromanagement, once laughed off as harmless managerial quirk, now stood indicted as an accomplice to grand-scale theft. Hegseth's casual shrug would haunt him, a smirk immortalized in split-screen next to Crockett's fiery glare. And as investigation after investigation peeled back layers of petty oversight to reveal massive fiscal sinkholes, the country realized the simplest truth of all. You can't guard the kingdom if your gaze never lifts from anthills. If this story set your pulse racing and you refuse to let micromanagers nickel-and-dime our future while billions disappear, smash that like button, hammer subscribe, and ring the notification bell right now. Your thumbs and voices turn up the heat under every bureaucrat who thinks hiding behind red tape will keep us quiet. Let's torch the paperclip palace together and build a system focused on results, not petty control. Stay loud, stay vigilant, and we'll see you in the next episode where truth takes no prisoners.